Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Senate Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee. Sue, would you please take roll?
Senator Bonner.
Here.
Senator Hicks.
Here.
Senator Jones.
Here.
Senator Schuler.
Here.
Chairman Landon.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Folks, we are all set to take up House Bill 45. It comes to us from the other side, and the good chairman, do you want to come forward and tell us about your bill, Chairman? You had a late night, and we appreciate you getting here early to catch us up.
We all had a late night, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senate, TRW. Great to see some familiar faces. We talk a lot about length of bills and good little bills, but this, I think that I've seen this year, is the shortest bill that we have. So if you go to page 1, line 14, you can simply see that otter is stricken from that sentence. The reasoning behind this was about 2 years ago, on many excursions and discussions with colleagues and neighbors and constituents from my neck of the woods. You know, we're seeing many more otters, and I have a history of being on the rivers a lot less now, and even on my 3 days on the river this year, saw families of otters, multiple families, a few different days. So, you know, I talked about it with neighbors and constituents about 2 years ago, and then this summer realized that, hey, you know, I wonder what this really looks like. So I was fishing one day and chasing a family of otters, and I called our local game and fish warden and said, hey, you know, what are the chances? You know, we got this great little stream we're doing a lot of restoration work on, and we're having some population issues with fish. What are the chances we can relocate these? He goes, oh, Andrew, we can't touch those. You know, and that inspired a little bit of a deeper dig into 23-1-101, with the intent really to just allow game and fish the opportunity, once I heard they were really untouchable in the current statute, Wyoming statute, to be able to manage them and potentially relocate them if you had a problem otter, in hopes of reducing conflict and solving a problem. You know, deeper dive, I thought, well, yeah, they must be protected federally. So I dove into that. Not the case. You know, they're not a federally protected species. So that's the bill. It removes them. But more importantly, as I began to run this bill on the other side of the body, it was a great educational experience. And getting to work with our game and fish and learn what the results are with this bill, where we end up. And they will do a much better job explaining it. But ultimately, there are fears out there that this is an all-out attack. This is a free-for-all. This is, you know, anyone can do anything with otters. It's really, really not the case. And unfortunately, the media picked up on that pretty quickly. This really gives a great tool to our agency to manage these animals. And no, I've never. I was laughing on the other side when we were getting through this. I don't know if I've met a trapper. So it didn't come from trappers. I'm told that the industry of trapping, this is not a pelt that's even worth its time, because it's not selling for enough right now. And so that's not where it's coming from. A lot of misinformation about that. And it really just gives the game and fish an opportunity to relocate them if they so choose. And other than that, just have the ability to manage them. So with that, Chairman, there's your one word bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well done. You get really awesome co-sponsors on this bill, I noticed. So committee questions for the chairman. Any questions about otters or House Bill 45? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Representative, in your studies, did you find out if there's a particular area where we seem to have a lot more of them, you know, located? I mean, is it just up in the Northwest? I've never seen one, don't know anything about them. So it'd be interesting for me to find out where they're being, you know, causing a problem, I guess. Thanks.
Tell us about your home stomping grounds up there.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator. You know, I don't want to tell you where I see them because then I'll give up where I recreate. But no, that's a very valid question. We have some conflicting maps, I would say. You know, we got some maps from the agencies and from, and I think, you know, some that have gone through the university and they have been seen statewide. Now, there is an argument that some river systems are not being able, you know, they're anecdotal. They're not many times they're seen. But, you know, in talking to colleagues, actually in Senator Hicks' part of the world, I was talking to Representative Davis, and he said one walked right up onto his porch this year. So, you know, I was surprised to when you get talking to people. Oh yeah, we've seen him. We've seen him in our rivers. Oh, we've seen him here. Is it a population that's currently booming? I would not say it is, but that's not the intent of this bill, and that needs to get recognized. You know, it is not to create an otter harvest season. It is simply to give the game fish a tool, a management tool to be able to deal with them on a case-by-case basis. So I think from your neck of the woods, Senator Schuler, I have seen them pretty far down in the Green River system, North Evanston. It wouldn't surprise me if you even have some on the Hams Fork. I can't say that factually, but yeah, I mean, they're going to chase food. And I think it's where they're not seeing a great number of them, which there is good fishing, is in the Thermopolis region, and that was learned through this process. But other than that, you know, obviously very strong populations in our national parks, Yellowstone, Grand Teton, and I've seen a number up there, but and then a lot down in the Green River system, certainly the Lincoln County area and Teton County. And yeah, there is some data I'd be happy to share with you with where they have seen them.
Any other questions? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little bit of background of why are they currently on the list? Any history there?
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Chairman. Thank you, Senator Boner. Decades ago, they were put on the list. I believe in the 50s is when they appeared on the list. And quite frankly, to be honest, I didn't know about 23-101 until I dove into this bill and a few other, you know, as you can read in that bill, ferret, fisher, lynx, wolverine. Yeah, so I imagine back then there may have been declining populations. It doesn't seem to be, we do have some of the world's foremost experts in the room that will testify, but it doesn't seem to really have a consistent studies of the last 40 years of, you know, it's a lot of folks that just see them. They've been living on this list, so I don't think they've really gathered or demanded a lot of attention besides just a wonderful piece of wildlife for our state to observe and see and keep our ecosystems complete.
Okay, well,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hicks.
So, Mr. Chairman, I got a question, Representative Byron, and maybe the department could come up and answer this question too, because it looks to me to a certain degree, this statute's a little archaic. And I was wondering when you were looking at this, was there any discussion of just removing a statutory definition of protected wildlife and then just leave that with agency rulemaking? Because there's a mix of ESA species on here, non-federal trust species on here. I mean, we really need to clean up this whole language as to what constitutes a protected animal, but any discussions along that line with the department? And I'd ask the department the same question because it does look archaic to me.
Chairman.
Representative Byron, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Great question. I did not have that discussion with them. You know, this bill certainly was a constituent bill that ended up being a bit of a heavier lift once we got it going in the House side. So it's I would be happy to have that conversation with them, but certainly not the intent of the bill. And I agree. I mean, I think it is worth looking at in terms of how we do manage our special species in the state and how that fits in with our agencies, you know, and our desires as a body.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask you to sit back, by golly, and stay if you can, because we may have a question a little bit later. But I want to get to some folks in the room today. Let's hear from our Game and Fish Department. Our agency folks are here. Appreciate you guys being here. Good morning, Director Ward. Good to see you both.
Good morning, Chairman, Senators. Angie Bruce, Director of Game and Fish. With me today is Dan Smith, our Division Chief of Wildlife. And just to add on, I think the sponsor did a really good job of talking about what this bill does and what it doesn't do, and kind of clearing up the misrepresentation of assuming that this bill would take it right to a hunting or trapping season. And that's not the case. By removing otters from the protected status, it would put it in the non-game status, and therefore treated like other non-game species, not opening it up to a hunting or trapping season. That would take a whole nother regulatory process to do. But what it would do is, like the sponsor said, is give the department an extra tool. So as it would be part of Chapter 52, listed with those species, it would allow for take, either lethal or non-lethal, in a conflict situation, for scientific research or for educational purposes. As we get species recovering in the state and spreading out, we often do see isolated conflict. And the sponsor talked about a little bit of that. And we currently don't have a tool, because they are listed under protected, to be able to go in there and actively remove otters if needed to. We can do mitigation practices, fencing and other things, but this would allow us to address those conflict. And I personally believe that when we are able to go in and address conflict situations with landowners, it helps build support for that species. As they become more popular across the state, I think that's really key and important for us to have the tool to do that. I did provide you guys with a map of the observations. So this is not a comprehensive population report of the species, but what this is through our WAS database, when staff or the public observe an otter in the state and they let us know, it's recorded into this database over time. So it paints a picture of presence where you might find otters in the state. And as the sponsor talked about, like a lot of species, in the 1950s, we saw a decline in a lot. And when species became protected, they weren't completely extirpated in the state. We still found them up in the parks area of northwest Wyoming. But then they slowly spread from there once they were protected. And so again, this removes them from that protected classification, but I'd be careful how we use that word. They're still protected. They're just not into that specific classification. And back to Senator Hicks's question regarding, is this an old statute that needs to be looked at? I actually thought of the same thing when prepping for and reviewing this bill, trying to understand maybe the history behind that category. It does include other species that are federally endangered and threatened, such as the black-footed ferret or the wolverine, but it doesn't include all of them. So it's a little inconsistent. So maybe taking a more broad brush look at those statutes might be warranted in the future. So with that, I'll just stand for any questions.
It's a little scary, Director, you thinking like Senator Hicks, but that might be something we could take into an interim, for example. So really appreciate it. Thank you, Director. Questions for the Director of the Game and Fish? Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Director, what other kinds of things, you talked about things you can do if you have to, remove them? And you mentioned fencing. Are there other methods that you might have out there that you can use to take care of this issue?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Good morning.
Good to
morning,
see you.
committee. Mr. Chairman, Senator, the other tools, we can do some mitigation stuff. So we could set electric fences up to try to keep otters from getting into ponds, because that's one of the complaints we hear. If you have a private fish pond that you're paying to put fish into, otters can make a dent in that. So you can do some mitigation stuff, putting electric fence up to try to keep otters out. Non-lethal methods, so if none of those things work that we're trying on the ground, we could trap and move them to someplace else. And in the end, if nothing works, that still would give us the tool to lethally remove them, but that would be a last step.
Go ahead. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Director Bruce, have you heard of any other people asking about the otters, or was Representative Byron one of the first ones, or has it kind of been an ongoing thing?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, it's been growing throughout the years, probably over the last decade as they continue to expand and get more populated, especially in the western part of the state. So definitely our regional staff in that area are hearing more.
You know, it's interesting, Director, we have begun to see them at Fremont Canyon, around Pathfinder and Alcova. And that never used to be the case, so kind of interesting, anyway. Senator Hicks?
Mr. Chairman, just to back on my topic here again, as we look at this, the bill, and it's a hodgepodge of endangered species, not endangered species. Director, again, my question would be, so if we just change the definition of protected animal to mean any animals as defined by rules promulgated by the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, that gives you complete latitude to manage all those species, and I'm cognizant of migratory treaty birds, endangered species, and some of these move on and off, and it just allows the professionals at the state of Wyoming to manage every species of the state of Wyoming based on rules and regs, because it's so difficult to come back and fix these statutes. As we tie our hands, we tie the department's hands. So your thoughts on just changing that verbiage to allow you guys to designate protected animals through rules and regulations adopted by the commission?
Director Bruce or Mr. Smith, what?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks. So in Chapter 52 regulation, which is our non-game regulation, it already says that all mammals not defined in statute as, and there's a list including protected animals, would default to non-game. And non-game animals are protected unless we allow for a permit for them. So by removing that, they would all default to a non-game animal and be protected in very similar manner to what otters are going to be protected if we continue with the current bill.
So, Mr. Chairman,
ahead,
just a
Senator.
continuation of that discussion is what I just heard you said. If we just repeal this provision, you already have all the flexibility with the language to do that. This becomes limiting from a standpoint, it's in statute. What we want to do is allow flexible management of the wildlife. So just repealing this would already accomplish what I had suggested, as saying that you could manage any protected species as defined by rule. Is that correct?
Chief? what do you
Mr.
think?
Chairman, Senator Hicks, that's correct.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, Mr. Chairman, if it's
ahead.
okay, Senator. And as we stated earlier, those that would have a federal protection would, obviously have that on top of it. So the other ones listed there, quite a few of them are federally protected species. So I don't feel that that would be a problem at all. We would be limited by those protection statuses at the federal level.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion, Director Bruce. So I actually do have a question. I just want to hit again at what this bill does. And you mentioned a couple other levels of regulation that would have to take place to put this species in a different spot. So can you go back over that again? I just want to make sure those streaming in and our public out there understands, by removing this species from the statute, there's still other steps that have to be taken, right? If you want to do something different with them.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Chief. Yeah, thanks.
So as the bill currently is written, they would default to a non-game animal under Chapter 52 regulation of the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission. And so they would be, the only way that you could take them is with a permit. So there's the option for a scientific research permit under Chapter 33, or if we had a conflict situation under Chapter 56 of Commission regulation, there's some other steps we could take there. This does not create any kind of a season. That would have to mean they would be reclassified in statute as a fur bearer, which this bill does not do. And so there would not be a commercial season. There wouldn't be a trapping season. There would be basically no authorized take without a permit from the department. And the only time we would issue a permit is for research or for conflict.
And Chief, obviously you can't hunt them either. You can't trap them, you can't hunt them, because there's no hunting season either, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Committee, any further questions for our department? Really appreciate you guys being here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Okay, anyone else agency-wise? I'm looking out across. Let's go to public testimony. Anyone want to testify on House Bill 45 this morning? Please come forward. Go ahead and fill up the 3 chairs, and we'll just roll through anybody who would like to visit with us about this bill. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. We just need a green light and introduce yourself for the record. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. It's an honor to be sitting here in front of you. I'm Mirav Ben David. I'm a professor of wildlife ecology at the University of Wyoming. I've studied otters worldwide since 1988, North American river otters since 1991, and in Wyoming since 2001. Most of the points on the map you received were logged into the system by myself and my students. In fact, right now I'm considered the world expert on North American river otters. I think this bill is premature. Removing otters at this point from the protected list puts at risk their expansion to other places in the state. If you look carefully at the map, all you see is that we do have otters in western Wyoming, in the Green River, Snake River, and Yellowstone National Park. We do not have viable otter populations elsewhere. We are seeing the initial steps of recolonization of river systems that we had otters before the 1900s, before the trapping industry. We would be smart to wait until we get viable populations in other places along the Wind River. I would encourage a change in their status when I start getting complaints from, anglers in the Bighorn River, or those friends of mine who live in Glendale. Once we have viable population elsewhere, then we can start thinking about changing the status of the species. And otters are highly sensitive to environmental pollution. We use them as indicator of river health. And so the fact that we haven't seen them expand into Wyoming should be a cause of concern, because we have seen reintroduced otters in Colorado, Nebraska, and Utah expanding freely along their waterways. So the question is, why don't we have it in Wyoming? And I think we should think about what we do to the species, also in view of our water quality and potential pollution.
Professor, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here this morning. Appreciate you coming over the mountain.
It was a pretty scary drive.
Yeah. So questions for Professor David? Any questions? Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering, it looks like we have, pretty healthy numbers on the west side. What would be your professional opinion of trying to just relocate some of them into the Wind River areas?
Go ahead, Professor.
That's an excellent question, Senator Jones. Thank you, Chairman. The issue we have one of the issues we have in Wyoming is that we are very high altitude, and most of the expansion from otters into the upper Wind, upper Shoshone, and from Colorado to the North Platte River are overland. River otters are semi-aquatic, and overland dispersal is really difficult. So it's really slow. And then expansion downriver depends on water quality and food availability. We do have excellent fisheries. In the Bighorn River is one of the world famous Fremont Canyon, and a Miracle Mile and Gray Reef are amazing places in terms of fisheries, but we have very few otters there. We have anecdotal, they're moving in, but they're not establishing a viable population yet. And the question is why? The problem that, from my research, nearly 40 years of research, shows that they are highly sensitive to accumulated toxins that fish are not affected by because they don't have certain enzymes, liver enzymes, that break the toxins into more toxic compounds. We call that bioaccumulation of toxins. And mammals, including otters, do have those enzymes. So the fact that we see amazing fisheries, really world-class in all our waterways, but no otters in sustainable numbers, is a cause of concern. And I think that in terms of our public health reasoning, and because otters are excellent indicators of water health, we should let the population expand, and if they don't establish viable population on the Bighorn River, we should go in and determine why not. Moving otters from western Wyoming to, for example, the Bighorn River, and we have talked about reintroductions and translocations of otters within the state with the non-game department. You know, what are you doing if you don't know why they're not there naturally? Are the animals you're going to introduce going to die from toxins? So I think before we do anything management-wise, we should evaluate what preventing them from expanding naturally. Because they can, they have in Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, where they have the right conditions, they have expanded and established viable populations, and the protection in those states has changed. But we don't see that in, as you can see in the maps, we don't see that in eastern Wyoming, most of Wyoming.
Any follow-up? So Professor, it's kind of hard for our little otters there in Fremont Canyon to find a girlfriend, so it just seems like maybe we could go get a couple for him, you know? So you're saying that that's actually not a very good idea to try to get some of our otters and bring them to the eastern part of the state?
Yes,
That's part of what I was intrigued with. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry for interrupting you. We do see otters come in, and just to clarify, the Department of Game and Fish funded my research over the years for the amount of $390,000, taxpayer dollars, to do otter research and find out where we have otters and why we don't have otters in parts of the state. My last master's student finished in May 2024, so the data we have is recent, and it's based on the best scientific methods available. And so we have discovered through non-invasive genetic sampling an otter in a section of river between Guernsey and Glendo. One animal that genetically matches Nebraska animals, meaning it has migrated upriver from Nebraska into Wyoming. One animal. The same thing is in Boise. In Boise Reservoir, we identified genetically an otter, which, by the way, a friend of mine who is an angler saw it, the same animal. But seeing an otter and having a viable population is widely different things. They are trying to move, they disperse, they naturally disperse, but they can't establish viable populations so far. I have to say that since my testimony to the House a few weeks ago, I have gotten a couple of new observations which are really encouraging, and one of them is from Fremont Canyon, and one of them is from the Sweetwater River, by Sweetwater Station, which we have not discovered any otters there in 2021 or 2022. So this is this is a new expansion, and it's exciting, and we should wait a few more years and find out. And if not, if they don't establish a viable population, the question is why? Because we really care about our constituents, and we want to have clean water all over the state. And this is a really important indicator species that will let us know whether we're doing well or not.
Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Professor David, right now, though, you wouldn't be able to trap them and relocate them even if you thought that was a good idea, right? Since they're protected, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yes, but the truth of the matter is that I would not want to do that. I'll be honest, Senator and Chairman, I don't see what the conflict is. With all due respect to the sponsor or the representative.
Yeah, old, what's his name? You know, Representative Byron. Guy from the House.
Representative Byron, I apologize. What are otters doing? What is the problem that we are trying to solve here? Have we had, is there evidence that otters in the Green River, in Lincoln County, are decimating fish population? There is none. Is there any evidence that otters have attacked anyone? There aren't any. So my point is, we are trying to legislate for the entire state of Wyoming based on someone's dislike for an animal? 4 constituents that don't like seeing otters fish in the river where they're trying to catch fish themselves? What is the issue we are trying to solve? Otters are unable to decimate fish populations. They are cruising, diving predators, and they have a very hard time even maintaining their needs, their energetic needs. They are unable to unless the fish are constrained in ponds. So are we going to be honest and say, we are trying to prevent otters from emptying recreational ponds? I have a solution for that, electric fencing. Why are we trying to prevent otters from naturally expanding to the rest of Wyoming because someone doesn't like seeing otters in the waterways? I'll add to that all our surveys, again funded by a large amount of taxpayer money by the department, our surveys show that otters' numbers have not increased in the Green River Basin because our actual collections that we've done in 2010 and 2011 were higher than our collections in 21 and 22. We see a decline in activity. In fact, we did not collect enough samples to do a formal population estimate in 21 and 22, where we were able to do it in 2010 and 2011. So my point is, we are trying to solve a problem that does not exist. And the whole motivation for this bill is scientifically sustained.
Professor, thank you. I'm going to get on to some other folks who'd like to visit with us about this bill, and we reserve the right to ask a question or two later if you can stick around.
Can I add just one thing about
Absolutely.
harvesting otters? The otters, North American river otters, are not protected federally, but they are considered a CITES II species. CITES is the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species. They're under Category 2 because they look like endangered otter species from elsewhere in the world that are Category 1. For example, the giant otters in Brazil, the hairy-nosed otters in Southeast Asia. So the United States is signed on the CITES Convention, and any harvest of otter, I'm not talking about incidental bycatch, but any harvest, whether it's done by the department or by individuals, will have to be regulated and reported. And that means the department will have to establish a whole system, which currently does not exist, to record any otter harvest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Landon, members of the TRW. How long do I have? Do I have to be really fast?
You just testified to us.
Okay,
We
great.
would
Thank you.
appreciate it. If I feel like we're getting a little long, I'll sure not be afraid to tell you.
Okay, great.
We do
Thank
have
you.
other folks in the room who I think would like to visit with us, so let's be respectful, but please, good to see you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Chairman Landon, members of the TRW, my name is Donald O'Toole. I'm a retired veterinarian and veterinary pathologist. I'm not a river otter specialist, but I'm puzzled by this effort to remove American river otters from Wyoming's protected wildlife list. So what I wanted to do was quote to you from what Steve Buskirk wrote in the most recent edition of Wild Mammals of Wyoming in Yellowstone National Park. This is what he says. The dramatic decline of otters over the temperate portion of its range has been the basis of much conservation concern. Otters are negatively affected by accidental trapping, river impoundments, loss of stream bank vegetation and structure, water pollution, and reduction in prey ambience. And then he goes on, abundance. Then Steve goes on to discuss the negative effects of illegal introduction of lake trout into Yellowstone Lake on both cutthroat trout and otters. And that's based on, a lot of that is based on Mirav's work. So over the last 71 years since going on the list, we've seen a slow and limited recovery of otters in Wyoming, and they are recolonizing part of their historic range. They do not, as I think you've heard already, they don't have much of a presence in the eastern half of the state. They have very limited presence in the North Platte. I have never seen one in the Laramie River, and I've lived in Laramie for 34 years. I think in general, and this is partly in response to what Senator Hicks said, we seem, for whatever reason, to do not a great job with mustelids, the genus to which river otters belong. We extirpated fishers in large part due to trapping loss of habitat. Black-footed ferrets, with which I worked, were nearly driven to extinction, and it's been a long and slow process to reestablish them. Wolverines are threatened and probably no longer occur in the state, at least as breeding animals. And now after 71 years, after a slow recovery, natural recovery, we're about to remove otters because of complaints. And the complaints that I hear, and I listen to the Game and Fish Commission, is mostly about them eating fish and getting into stocked ponds. And I guess the question I have is, what have the owners of ponds done to keep otters out? There's methods to do that, which Mirav has spoken to. And it's a little bit like Groundhog Day for me. We keep making short-term management decisions, such as allowing stocked ponds. And then when animals, and that's in historic range of some species, and then as those species begin to recover, they're then regarded as the problem. And the problem in some part is related to those earlier decisions about having stocked ponds. So I ask you not to support House Bill 45. Thank you.
Mr. O'Toole, thank you. Really appreciate you being here and well stated.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much. Let's go to further testimony. Come on forward. We've got 3 chairs up here. Please join each other, be ready to go, and we'd love to hear from everyone who wants to visit with us on House Bill 45. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I'm surprised I didn't have to throw any elbows to get up here today. I wanted to chat a little bit about like carnivores in general and bringing carnivores back. And I am going to call an otter a carnivore, small, toothy, furry. It's a little one, but he's there. It's a carnivore. And we, at Wyoming Wildlife support having these whole ecologies, having large carnivores, medium carnivores, and small carnivores on the land. And in a lot of that work that we've done, we've talked about what it takes to have these animals in our backyards and what it takes to learn to live with them. And some of that is social capital. And that's sort of how we see this bill. We see this bill as offering the Game and Fish a tool to build social capital for larger acceptance of otters as they go into more and more places. Try our best as we may, we're always going to have a couple that get in trouble, no matter what it is. It can be humans, it can be otters, it can be wolves, it can be all sorts of things. But having the tools to deal with the ones that maybe aren't where they're supposed to be or aren't where it's best for them, as unfortunate as that is, and as much as we try to mitigate that, having that tool, I see as just being able to build the social capital to have these otters in different places, in more places, as they spread throughout Wyoming. So I actually see this bill as very beneficial to the recovery of otters, and in fact, forwarding that movement and that good work that has been done. I'm in awe of listening to the science before us. It's incredible what these animals are. I just think it's amazing that we have them here. And as they expand, we do have to have a couple tools on the ground for the folks that may not be as in awe or may be frustrated. And we know that that comes down, it trickles up to you guys, you hear about it. But the other thing I want to say is it takes an act from you, again, to do anything close to trapping or hunting them. This is, being designated non-game, not game. Does not mean they are trappable or huntable. It just means that the department has a little bit of forgiveness when they can figure out how to deal with some of the conflict issues that we're certainly hearing about them having. I think one of the last things I'd like to say is that along with that comes, we've talked in other bills about how steeper penalties sometimes disincentivize reporting or enforcement. You think you have, and I would say that unfortunately, I think what we see sometimes with trapping is a disincentive to report if it is a protected species. Try as you best. Sometimes I think we heard about it, sometimes they catch otters. I think pulling them from this protected is actually going to incentivize a lot more reporting. We're going to have a lot more data. We're going to let people sort of deal with these as conflict comes, and never once are we putting them on the trapping or hunting list. I'm just saying it disincentivizes when they have an accidental bycatch. So we have an incredible Game and Fish who's really dedicated, and they've put, I think I heard 300,000, I think the taxpayer dollars was a little off, it's sportsman dollars on the ground. And there's a lot of effort here to say that we want these back, we want to see them, but I think this bill is actually getting us in a better position to have otters than it is being negative. And I may be in the minority here, but I see it as a great thing, and I just stand in support of it.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Mr.
Always
Chairman?
good to see you. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Johnson, what do you think about, the trouble when we write statutes is sometimes they sit around for decades and they never get reviewed, and in some cases actually tie the hands of this is a classic case of being able to manage a species, would be just to repeal this provision and then allow, as the department said, they're already going to be under the non-game statutory component that allows them complete flexibility instead of we still have a list here. And so what's your thoughts on that?
Ms. Johnson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hicks, I was nodding my head in the back thinking I think I'm always for more flexibility for the department. I trust our scientists. I trust the people in charge. If you're asking if I feel like doing it right now in this bill is the right move, I'm uncertain on that one, just because of how tight the title is and how everything looks at that. But I think the point that you're getting at, I'm in very much agreement with, and I'm always there to hand the authority and the flexibility to the department to do their jobs, as they have my trust completely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And you're right, this is a very tight title on this bill. And so I think what we're probably thinking is that if we want to tackle where Senator Hicks is going, that'll probably be in the coming months, perhaps during an interim. So
Mr. Chairman, I would stay, and I'm happy to sit at that table and help figure out how we bring, the right people into the room to make sure it gets done well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Johnson. Appreciate it. Further testimony on House Bill 45. Anyone else want to come forward this morning? Good morning, Mr. Garrett. Good to see you. We need a green light and a,
I do, Mr. Chairman. Let me get my notes out here so I remember who I am.
yeah, yeah.
My name is Richard Garrett, and today I'm here representing the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, and I think you know our mission, but it's perhaps worth restating. We work with all people to protect the lands, waters, and wildlife of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem now and for future generations. I think that's a mission that every member of this committee can relate to, and we are grateful that you do. Your protections, your appreciation of Wyoming, our open spaces, our wildlife and habitat are, I think, at the very core of what you do as the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee. So I promise you we value that greatly. Lots has been discussed this morning and lots of great points of view. Senator Hicks, I appreciate your ideas on how this statute that was first passed in 1953 might be modernized. You did use the word archaic, and that hurt my feelings a little bit because that 1953 session was the first session of my life. I wasn't there. I think I was still in diapers. I wasn't as precocious as some, but I'm hoping when you refer to archaic, you're not referring to me, Senator Hicks. We're hearing that there are 2 or 3 categories under which otters might be managed differently than they are now, conflict resolution being one of them. These conflicts are apparently, though, primarily occurring on private property. And that is a concern to us, that sportsman dollars are being used in support of private enterprise in this way. I'd ask that we think very carefully of that. And we've also been talking about a problem otter as a singular, but we also hear that otters are most often found in terms of families. So it's not clear to me if we're removing one problem otter or if we're removing a family of otters. And that changes the dynamic quite a bit. I think that you all can appreciate that very much. Reference was made to Dr. Steve Buskirk, and I've actually known Dr. Buskirk for some time. And I want to point something out that you all can take a great deal of pride in. We all, as Wyomingites, can take a great deal of pride in. Dr. Buskirk did write the book Wild Mammals of Wyoming and Yellowstone. And his research showed that when we became a state, there were 115 mammals on our Wyoming landscape. It also showed that all 115 of those mammals remain on our landscape. Wolverine is an occasional visitor here, or perhaps not breeding population, but it's something that we all can take a great deal of pride in. And so I'd suggest that the protection that has been afforded since 1953 for otters is one that we should celebrate and not discontinue without a great deal of thought and contemplation. So I think my urge for the committee is to refer this, Senator Landon, Chairman Landon, as you have suggested, to the interim so that we can bring more voices into the room as a previous commenter offered. I promise you Greater Yellowstone Coalition would be at that table as well. Perhaps we could even bring Dr. Buskirk in. And And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer questions. I do want to add, I guess, one more thing, and that is we sincerely appreciate the bringer of the bill. We support Game and Fish Department, its science, its managers. If this bill is to pass, we will participate as closely as we can in making sure it's a success. And for that, I'm appreciative. So, Mr. Chairman, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Always appreciate your perspective and appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Questions for the Greater Yellowstone Coalition? Okay, thank you, Richard.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Mr.
it.
Chairman.
Anyone else in the room like to come forward and testify on House Bill 45? Sue, do we have anyone online this morning? Let's go to online.
Yes, Mr.
Visitors
Chairman, we
and-
have two.
Okay, thank you. You want to bring in Kristen Combs, I believe? I have listed here.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm going to leave my video off this morning. I've got an unstable internet connection, so I hope you guys can hear me okay.
Good morning, Ms. Combs. We can, and welcome.
Thank you. I am the executive director of an organization known as Wyoming Wildlife Advocates. Happy to be here to testify on this bill. I think one of the things that we would like to point out, I mean, in support of all the research that's been done by Dr. Ben David, and sounds like there's a lot of problems that otters still face in the state. The main thing is that there are ways of handling conflicts with otters still as a protected species. And I think if we're adjusting the entire state laws just because of a few people that have problems with otters in stock ponds, then we're looking pretty short-sighted, and we should be really focused on handling those conflicts in non-lethal ways, because otherwise you're just recycling the conflict, you're taking away a family of otters, you're leaving a hole for more otters to enter. Just relocation just doesn't really solve the problem. It's more of a recycling of the conflict rather than a solution. So we would stand opposed to this bill, like to see otters still protected, and to have the Game and Fish continue to work on non-lethal solutions for conflict prevention in those situations where there are problems. And we would even offer, to have funding available to help with those conflicts. So thank you very much for letting me testify this morning.
Ms. Combs, thank you. Just a quick question. The Wyoming Wildlife Advocates, I guess I have not heard of your group. Where are you based out of?
Yes, Chairman Landon, we are based out of Jackson in Teton County, but we work on issues all across the state
Thank
for
you.
wildlife.
Thank you for being here this morning. Any questions for Ms. Combs? Thank you for streaming in. We appreciate it. Let's move on to, I have a Ms. Anderson listed. Okay. You're not gonna buzz. Good morning. Ms. Anderson, take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Madhu Anderson, and I'm from Green River, Wyoming. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I strongly urge you to vote no on HB 0045. I agree with the Professor Ben David's statement. We are trying to solve a problem which does not exist. This bill is unnecessary and should not have been even brought up, as it lacks thorough research. We do not have a clear understanding of the otter population in Wyoming. As concerned citizens, we should at least know how many otters are present before discussing their removal from the protected species list. In my more than 10 years of living and camping in Wyoming, I have seen only a couple of otters myself. I doubt many of you have observed otters running around in abundance which would warrant the urgent need for this bill. Before we consider killing these animals, we must investigate why they are absent from many waterways. More research is needed before bringing forth such unnecessary legislation. Otters have far greater value alive than as mere fur in a trapper's collection. Their presence plays an important role in maintaining the health and diversity of our ecosystems. Now, regarding solutions for protecting sportfish in ponds, there are more effective alternatives available, such as electric fencing. Simply resorting to killing otters will not solve the underlying issues. It will only create a cycle where new otters move in, leading to repeated conflicts. So I urge you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, to listen to the voices of the people of Wyoming and reject this bill, HB 0045. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, thank you very much. Any questions, committee? Senator Jones, from your neck of the woods.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Anderson, actually, there is a little great happy otter family right in Jamestown. I have a friend that lives out there and she posts pictures of the otters playing on her land and right there in the Green River. So we do have some right in our area. And I just wanted to point out that this would not allow them to be trapped or hunted or anything like that. What we're looking at would not allow people to be harming the otters.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, go ahead. If you have any other comments?
Yes, Senator Jones and Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I have seen a couple of otters near Green River when I went swimming there, but I have camped all over Wyoming and I have not really seen that many otters. So I don't believe that we have enough population of otters to pass this bill to allow killing of otters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson, for taking the time. We appreciate it. Do we have anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, that's all that joined.
Okay, one more time. Anyone else want to testify on House Bill 45? Mr. Chairman, would you like to come forward and give us any final thoughts you have? And then we'll take up this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a chance at trying to relieve some of the points that were brought. I will reiterate that it was mentioned that I have a dislike for otters, and I want to publicly say that that is not true. I love the otter. I spent 20 years as a fishing guide, and the otter was often the best part of my day, getting to observe it. Thank you for making it very clear what this bill does and the intent. I also want to clarify that not once ever did someone that owns a fish pond consult me or ask me about this bill. So that has certainly been discussed, and I think our wonderful agency hears about it. But it just in terms of the idea behind the drafting did not play into my my desire to draft the bill or pursue this. So I appreciate the work of the committee and TRW and the great questions, and look forward to seeing where it goes.
Representative, it's nice to have a few minutes. We're both so busy and in our own chambers, we don't get to see you very often, so it's good to spend the morning with you. Thanks for bringing the bill. Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on House Bill 45. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill?
The bill.
Moved by Senator Hicks. Discussion? Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator
As
Hicks.
you can well imagine, I have an amendment. I want to take this good little bill and make it into an excellent smaller bill, Mr. Chairman. And so having looked at the
My only
title,
caution, Senator, is that I want you to take a look at the title of this bill.
Mr. Chairman, I have looked at the title and I think the proposed amendment fits right in there. So, Mr. Chairman, I would go to page 1, line 7. This deals with section 1. And after is would be to strike amend to read and insert the word repealed. And then, Mr. Chairman, so the conforming part of that amendment would be to delete everything in line on the rest of the balance of page 1, so line 9 through 14. And then also to make that conforming, you would go up to line 1, and after game and fish, you would strike removing otters from the definition of protected animals for the purposes of hunting regulations on line 3. So what's left is there is an act relating to game and fish and providing for an effective date. And I think that's permissible under our guidelines of working within the title and the context of the bill.
So Senator, your repealer would affect that entire statute.
Only section Romanet 9, which
And so Romanet 9 goes specifically to otters.
it goes to protected animals. And Mr. Chairman, the reason is, getting back to is the testimony from the department. If we remove that, they've already got rules and regulations that do the exact same thing. So it just puts it back in the Game and Fish Commission's authority under their existing rules and regulations, and it doesn't change the status of otters one iota by cleaning up an archaic statute.
So, Director, I'm looking at the department. Would you mind coming forward and visiting with us about this? My only caution is I don't want to jeopardize the bill. I understand where the senator is going, but I don't want to catch something up that's going to not be germane or not be workable. So, Department, what do you think? Chief, what?
Yeah,
or-
Mr. Chairman, Senators, I'll.
Director, we're doing this on the fly, so I.
Yeah, I think what our conversation around otters would pertain to the other species listed there. So again, it wouldn't take away protections. It would just recategorize them as non-game and then allow for that management tool. So the same conversation we just had around otters would apply then to fisher and pika. The other species are all federally listed.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Go ahead, Senator Hicks.
So it doesn't compound anything, and it kind of cleans up the statute from a standpoint. It gives clear direction. And then you have the flexibility as circumstances change species to species to address those through your current rulemaking process. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it doesn't. It actually simplifies. And me and Chief Smith were talking about this on the side, and really where we are trying to decipher is how this came to be, right? The history of it. You know, the Endangered Species Act came into the 70s. So this was in place prior to the Endangered Species Act. So it gave that sort of state protection. But looking back at it now, we have the Endangered Species Act that protects those other species. And then the state managed ones, yes, fall into the non-game protected status. So it is, in my view, a cleanup and would help maybe with some of the discussion we heard today from the public of, well, what that protected means. I think it would actually help us into the future in that conversation.
So, Director, just for clarification for everyone in the room and on streaming in, this pulls other animals into this title, removing otters as protected animals. But this amendment would remove other animals. And this bill has made it all the way through the other side with representatives not knowing that. I guess I'm speaking out loud just to share a little bit of a concern on that front. But tell me again what else this removes.
So, Mr. Chairman, Senators, looking at that list, black-footed ferret is currently federally endangered. So is wolverine and lynx. So it would be fisher and pika, along with otter. So adding those two other species, taking away from that protected. The other ones have a different protection, so that's why I kind of put them in two categories.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. Yeah, Chief.
may I add in? And even at the time that those would be delisted from the ESA, they would still fall under non-game. They would still fall under the same protections. that we would have for otters if you remove those today. So
Yeah.
there is a regulation that already would protect them. It would not make them a hunted or a commercial species that could be trapped. It would just change them from a statutory authority to a commission authority for their protection.
Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate you guys. Senator Hicks, I want to make sure that we understand what the amendment does. Committee, any questions of the bringer of the amendment? Any questions? Are you ready for the question on the amendment? All those in favor of Senator Hicks's amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. I'm a no. That amendment has carried. This is a different bill. So Sue, do you have that down, what the amendment does?
Mr. Chairman, I have the amendments down. Just for clarification, was there any change to the title?
There was not.
Okay.
Committee, I'm not sure, I'm not sure this bill can go upstairs this way now. I'm just being honest with you. What we've done to it is not in the title. I don't think it's germane. And I have some real concerns with that. So discussion. Maybe that's the idea, is to kill the bill. If that's what we're wanting to do, let's.
Mr. Chairman. if I
Senator
may.
Boner, and then we'll go to Senator Hicks.
And Mr. Chairman, that's not why I voted for it. I think that this is a good bill and it highlights a bigger issue. I'm in complete support of the bill. We can always have that discussion on the floor. You know, what's germane according to our rules. I do understand the concern that, we have a bill that goes halfway through the process and all of a sudden it has been changed. But we've also heard testimony from our Game and Fish Department that this statute is irrelevant. It was a pre-ESA Endangered Species Act statute that has no material effect in real life. And so I think we should focus on that as well.
Okay,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks.
this is by no means an attempt to kill the bill. Like the legislative processes, if we go through there and we gain more information, we're supposed to refine and make better bills out of this. Given the testimony on an archaic statutes, I have always thought it's the appropriate use of committees to get rid of archaic statutes and bring them up into the current practice that we have and allow for professional management. Something that was adopted in 1952 is by the very definition of archaic. So, Mr. Chairman, we can have the discussion on the bill title. I think, based on my time here, it's completely within the purview of this committee and meets the title of the bill is an act relating to game and fish, and changing amend to repeal is certainly within the permissive content of this committee to be able to do so. Again, I will defend this bill vigorously on the floor and the amendment because I do think it gets back to science-based management and cleans up our statutes.
Okay, Sue, do you want to take roll on Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one last question. Yeah, I don't know if this muddies it up or not, but by just taking out otters as protected, if you just went removing protected animals, took out otters as, that would be I think a cleanup on just the title. I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Is it worth a motion? I don't know. Or should we just leave it alone?
I just leave it alone.
Leave it alone? Okay.
Take it back to the original draft.
Okay, this bill obviously has to go back to the other side. I have no idea what that other chamber will react to, so we'll just move the bill the way we're going, and let's take roll on House Bill 45.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 45 as amended. Senator Boner?
Aye.
Senator Hicks?
Aye.
Senator Jones?
Aye.
Senator Schuler?
Aye.
Chairman Landon?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that's 5 ayes.
Okay, that bill will go to the floor. I will probably turn it over to the committee to discuss the bill up on the floor. Primarily, I think we've changed the bill, but it still has merit. So, all right. We will more than likely see everyone on Thursday morning for a committee meeting, although we do not have a lot of bills read in yet, so, okay.